My wife had amnesia. She had completely forgotten me, the boy who grew up next door, her childhood sweetheart, and the man she'd been married to for 5 years. Instead, she was acting nauseatingly close with her college first love, as if no one else were in the room. Seeing that, I finally gave up and filed for divorce. My friends and family all tried to talk me out of it, saying she'd regret everything once her memory returned. Later, when she was finally discharged, I didn't hesitate to drive her straight to the county clerk's office. Even when she eventually remembered and claimed she still loved me, I didn't forgive her. All of this happened because at my core, I'm just a hardcore anime nerd. My wife, Chloe Reynolds, had been in a car accident. I was at the office when the hospital called. Panic-stricken, I scrambled to get time off from my boss and dashed for the elevator, dialing my in-laws as I ran. By the time I reached the hospital room, Chloe was awake, propped up against the pillows and staring blankly out the window. I let out a breath of relief, seeing she was okay. Hearing the door, she turned her head. The moment our eyes met, her beautiful eyes filled with utter bewilderment. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" A cold sense of dread washed over me. Her gaze was too distant, the way you'd look at an old high school acquaintance you hadn't seen in years. There was none of her usual warmth. I walked toward the bed. "The hospital called. They said you were in an accident. How are you feeling? Does anything hurt?" Habitually, I reached out to touch her forehead to check for a fever. But as soon as my hand brushed her cheek, Chloe flinched like a startled cat, pulling away sharply. "What do you think you're doing?" she snapped, shrinking back and narrowing her eyes. "Ethan, I'm warning you. Just because we grew up together doesn't mean you get to be touchy-feely with me. I'm not that kind of girl. Besides, I have a boyfriend." I stared at her serious, slightly bratty expression. I stood in silence for a few seconds before turning on my heel to find her attending physician. The doctor confirmed my suspicions. Chloe had a hematoma on her brain, causing retrograde amnesia. Her memory had regressed to a specific point in her past. He told me to be prepared for a long recovery. I rubbed the bridge of my nose, took a deep breath, and walked back in. Seeing her still eyeing me with suspicion, I softened my tone. "Do you know how old you are right now?" I asked. 20, obviously, she replied, looking at me like I was the one with the head injury. "We're the same age, Ethan. Did you hit her head too?" I hesitated, then spoke the truth quietly. "Chloe, you're 30, and we've been married for 5 years. You're saying I married you?" Chloe bolted upright, her eyes wide with shock as if she'd been struck by lightning. "I thought of you as my best bro. How could you even think of hitting on me?" A vein throbbed in my temple. I leaned against the wall, rubbing my forehead. "It was a setup. Our parents fixed us up, and honestly, you were the one who suggested we just get hitched and get it over with." "Me?" Chloe pointed at herself, incredulous. "You said, and I quote, 'Better to give the business to a friend than a stranger. At least I know where you've—'" Before I could finish the sentence, she lunged forward and clamped her hand over my mouth. Her face turned a deep shade of crimson. She had always been blunt and loud. That definitely sounded like something she would have said. "Shut up," she hissed, pulling her hand back and looking away, her ears glowing red. I must have been out of my mind. She mumbled something under her breath, then looked back at me. "So, what happened over the last 10 years? Talk to me." Relieved she was no longer treating me like a predator, I pulled up a chair and began to tell her our story. After college, I stayed in Chicago to work. My life was predictable. I was a total otaku, a homebody who preferred the 2D world. When I wasn't at work, I was home watching anime or gaming. I had a custom glass display case for my scale figures. I had them all: Rem, Kikyo, Kumi, 02, Saber, Cory Dandy. A literal army of plastic waifus. My only social outings were hiking or camping trips with a few guys from high school. People tried to set me up, but I always said no. I had zero interest in marriage, but my parents were desperate for grandkids. They nagged me constantly. I kept stalling. Why bother with a real girlfriend when a 2D one is perfect and doesn't talk back? Then, one day, my mom dragged me to see Chloe. Our moms were best friends, the kind who lived in the same subdivision and traded Tupperware every week. Since we were kids, they joked about us getting married. Chloe and I got along well enough as bros, but she always teased me for being a shut-in nerd, and I thought she was way too much of a tomboy. Neither of us was interested in the other. But because we were both single and living at home, our mothers went into overdrive. They forced us on dates. It got ridiculous. Once, they sent us to Disney World and accidentally booked a single-bed suite. Chloe listened quietly, her long lashes casting shadows over her eyes. She nervously toyed with the edge of her hospital gown. After a long silence, she looked up, her gaze a mix of confusion and urgency. And then, How did we end up together? Then, I said, my mind drifting back to a humid summer night 5 years ago. We'd been fake dating for 6 months to please them. One night, after you had a huge blowout with your mom, you dragged me to a dive bar. After 2 beers, you looked at me with bloodshot eyes and asked, Ethan, do you want to just marry me? I'm sick of my mom's crap, you said. I'm at least a 7 out of 10. You're getting a deal. And you said yes? Chloe asked. Of course. You were selling yourself so hard. I had to give you some credit. I teased, trying to lighten the mood. Chloe blushed, but didn't snap at me this time. She just whispered, only a dog would fall for that pitch. She paused, then asked, so, do we have kids? 5 years is a long time. I blinked, answering instinctively. No. What? She shouted, her eyes nearly popping out her head. 5 years and no kids? Is something wrong with you, or is it me? Neither. I interrupted, the vein in my temple throbbing again. At first, you wanted to focus on your career. I didn't mind. Then I got busy with the promotion. We actually planned to start trying next year. We were just getting ready for it. That was a half-truth. I left out the most important part. For the first 2 years, she didn't want them. But over the next few years, I realized I'd actually fallen in love with her. I found that my real-life wife was far more captivating than any 2D character. We had a great rhythm. I'd give her massages after work, she'd help me relax, and we were genuinely happy. I hadn't wanted a third person to ruin our dynamic yet. But a hospital room wasn't the place for that confession. By the way, I said, remembering her earlier comment, what was that about a boyfriend? I knew she'd had a boyfriend in college, but I only knew he existed. I'd never cared to ask for details. But now that she had amnesia, I didn't want any drama. Oh, Chloe froze. She stuttered for a while, unable to find the words. How was an amnesiac supposed to tell her husband that she was currently in love with her ex-boyfriend in her mind? Especially since the first thing she'd done upon waking up was call Caleb Vance. Would Ethan be angry? Her mind was a mess. Chloe, honey, are you okay? At that moment, Chloe's mother rushed in. She hurried to the bedside, her face etched with maternal concern. Chloe's shoulders slumped in relief. Mom, I'm fine. Just hit my head. Her mother started checking her arms for bruises and almost pulled her gown up before Chloe stopped her. Mom, there are people here. Her mother looked around, saw only me, and waved it off. It's just your husband. What are you embarrassed about? I led my mother-in-law into the hallway and explained the situation, the amnesia, the regression to age 20. Her face went pale. Oh goodness, how could this happen? I repeated the doctor's reassurance. It was likely temporary, and once the swelling went down, she'd be back to normal. After she spoke with the doctor herself, she calmed down. I sat in a room while they chatted for a bit until my mother-in-law turned to me. Ethan, go back to work, honey. I'll stay here with her. I wanted to refuse. I was a department manager at a major firm. Taking a day or 2 off wouldn't hurt anyone. But I could see the look in Chloe's eyes. Chloe beat me to the punch. Yeah, Ethan, go ahead. I want to talk to my mom anyway. Her voice had a forced coldness to it. She clearly didn't want me there. I gave a polite smile, told my mother-in-law to call if anything changed, and left. The next day during lunch, I swung by a florist to pick up a bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite, and grabbed a taro milk tea from the shop she loved. I was rushing to the hospital, thinking that maybe this amnesia was an opportunity. We'd never had a proper honeymoon phase because of the way we got married. Maybe I could woo her all over again. But when I pushed the door open, the smile froze on my face. A man in a sharp suit was sitting on the edge of Chloe's bed. He was holding both of her hands in his, whispering something. Chloe's head was tilted, her expression softer than I'd ever seen it. At the sound of the door, she flinched like a guilty child and yanked her hands away. She looked down, her bangs hiding her face, and said nothing. The man stood up. He walked toward me with a smug smile and extended a hand. I am Caleb Vance, Chloe's boyfriend. Crack. The sound of my hand connecting with his face echoed through the sterile room. I didn't wait for him to finish his sentence. You don't even have the decency to hide it? You come into my wife's hospital room to flex? Who gave you the balls? I shook out my hand, my eyes as cold as ice. After years in the corporate world, I wasn't an idiot. I knew exactly what was happening based on Chloe's reaction. I told her yesterday I was her husband, and she still called the ex. If she wanted to go back to him, the least she could have done was ask for a divorce first. Caleb clutched his face, rage flickering in his eyes. He balled his fists, stepping toward me. Ethan, stop. You got it all wrong. Chloe shouted. Wrong. I let out a harsh, dry laugh. I told you yesterday, you're 30. You're my wife. Does a head injury suddenly make cheating okay? I thought I was 20, she cried out. Caleb was my boyfriend then. I called him instinctively when I woke up. He only came because he was worried. I looked at her tear-streaked face and felt absolutely nothing. No pity, no love. Just emptiness. 3 questions, Chloe. 1. How did he know which hospital and which room? 2. Why do you still have his number after all these years? A good ex should be treated like they're dead. 3. I stepped closer, staring into her eyes. You knew yesterday that you were married. So why were you letting him hold your hands just now? Did your mother not teach you anything about boundaries? This isn't amnesia, Chloe. This is a choice. Ethan, you're an asshole. Chloe suddenly screamed, her face turning bright red. You're disgusting. If my mom hadn't forced me to break up with Caleb, I never would have married a loser like you. Caleb looked triumphant for a split second, but I cut him off before he could speak. I looked at Chloe, my voice flat and dead. As soon as you're discharged, we're going to the courthouse to file for divorce. I turned and walked out without a second glance. I tossed the sunflowers into the trash can in the hallway. Night fell, and my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. When I answered, the background was a chaos of shouting and crying. Ethan, get to the hospital. Your father-in-law is in a fight. I found out the reason soon enough. My father-in-law had caught Caleb in the room. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I didn't want to go, but I drove there anyway. The hospital room was a mess. Chloe was frozen in the middle of the room. To her left were her parents, her father heaving with rage. To her right was Caleb, his suit rumpled. My father-in-law had 3 bloody scratches on his face. Caleb had a massive black eye. Seeing me, my mother-in-law grabbed my arm like a lifeline. Her hand was shaking. Ethan, thank God you're here. This piece of trash tried to take Chloe away while she's confused. Mrs. Reynolds, let's be fair, Caleb said, straightening his tie with a smirk. Chloe is a grown woman. She can make her own choices. I ignored him. I looked past Chloe's pale face to her mother. Mrs. Reynolds, take a breath. What did you call me? She froze, her eyes wide. Ethan, why are you being so formal? This afternoon, Chloe told me that you forced her to break up with Caleb and that she only married me because she had no choice. I looked at Chloe then. Since she clearly never got over him, I'm stepping aside. We're getting a divorce the day she gets out of here. No, Ethan, you can't, both in-laws screamed. My father-in-law stomped his foot. She's talking nonsense. My mother-in-law turned on Chloe, her voice exploding with repressed fury. You ungrateful girl. You lied to him? You were the one who came crying to me, begging me to let you stay with Caleb. And when I finally said fine, bring him over, you went to see him and came back sobbing, saying you were done. You wouldn't even tell us why. Chloe went white. She stared at Caleb, her voice trembling. Caleb, is that true? You told me my mom forced us apart. You lied. Chloe, don't let them manipulate you, Caleb said, his hurt act perfected. Your mom hated me. I wouldn't lie to you. Chloe stepped back away from his reach. She took a few jagged breaths, the fog in her eyes finally clearing. Caleb, leave. I'm married. Don't ever come back. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Guilt, panic, and something else. Caleb's mask finally cracked. You're kicking me out? He sneered. I stayed single all these years for you. You call me, I come running, and now you dump me again? You're a cruel bitch, Chloe. If you try to take her, you're dead to US, her mother yelled. That was the breaking point. Caleb's face contorted into something ugly. You know what? Phoenix, you're a stuck-up slut anyway. You wouldn't even let me touch you when we were dating, and now you're acting all high and mighty because you got a ring? Chloe's face was bloodless. What? I only came here because I thought I finally had a chance to get laid. Caleb spat, the vitriol pouring out of him. I wanted to see if the married version of you was any easier. All that stuff about waiting for you? Total bullshit. You're a joke. Chloe grabbed her head and sank to the floor, screaming. She began to shake violently, clearly pushed past her limit. Caleb spat on the floor and walked out, cursing under his breath. Her parents rushed to her side, calling her name. I stood there, cold and detached. I didn't move. I simply turned and walked to the nurse's station to tell them the patient was having a breakdown. Chloe was unconscious for a full day. When she woke up, her memory was back. I was surprised she recovered so quickly. I waited until after work to head to the hospital. In the room were her mother and my own mother. My parents had been on vacation in Europe, but flew back as soon as they heard. Ethan, you're here, my mother-in-law said, pushing me toward the bed. She's been asking for you since she woke up. She really loves you. My mom chimed in. Son, stay with her. Once the room cleared, I stood by the bed. Chloe reached out for my hand. I stepped back, her eyes filled with pain. Ethan, I remember everything. I'm so sorry. I put you through so much these last 2 days. I didn't mince words. Get better. When you're out, we're signing the papers. No kids, so it's simple. We keep what we brought in. No one owes anyone anything. I'm not divorcing you, she cried. I know I messed up. I shouldn't have called him, but I was confused. Stop lying to yourself, I said. Before we married, I told you I didn't care about your past, as long as it stayed in the past. But you kept his number for 10 years. You can't blame that on amnesia. I didn't. I deleted it years ago. She was sobbing now. I still knew the number by heart. I didn't think he'd still have the same one. And I broke up with him back then because I found out he was seeing sex workers. I thought he was disgusting. I could never want him back, she wailed. I just smiled. Fine. Let's say 20-year-old you remember the number. Why did you let him come over after you found out we were married? Even if you called him before you knew, you could have told him not to come or blocked him. You could have told me. I would have handled it. But you chose to see him. You chose to let him hold your hand. Where was your loyalty then? Where was your common sense? Chloe's tears flowed harder. I was overwhelmed. Suddenly having a husband. I couldn't process it. That's not an excuse, I said, standing up. I'm done. As an otaku, my view on love was shaped by anime. The kind of all-consuming, fated love you see in your name. Even if they lose their memories, they recognize each other in a crowd. I know real life isn't a movie, but there has to be a baseline of loyalty. If you know you have a husband, but you're still entertaining an ex, you're just waiting for a chance to cheat. Amnesia isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. That night, I told my parents. My dad barely looked up from the news. If you thought it through, fine. My mom, after talking to Chloe's mom, tried to intervene. Ethan, honey, I talked to her mom. Nothing happened with that Vance guy. They just talked. She was confused. Divorcing over a conversation is crazy. I looked at her. Mom, if I have to, I'll just file for legal separation. Either way, this marriage is over. My mom started to protest, but my dad walked over and pulled her out of the room. The boy knows what he's doing. Stay out of it, he whispered, closing the door behind them. For the next week, I bury myself in work. I didn't go to the hospital. My dad texted me a few days later. Chloe moved back in with her parents. Her mom is driving your mother crazy with the crying. Just ignore it. Chloe was hiding at her parents' place, hoping I'd cool off. When they realized I'd blocked their numbers, they went after my parents. My mom, unable to stand her best friend's tears, tried to corner me again. Finally, I drove to my grandfather's house. He lived for me, his only grandson. I walked in, said nothing, and just hugged him and started sobbing. My boy, what happened? Who hurt you? He cried, patting my back. Grandpa, I sniffled. My mom is trying to force me to stay with a woman who cheated on me. I don't want to live like this. What? My grandpa's face turned purple with rage. That night, my mom called me, screaming, You little brat. How could you tell your grandfather that? I'm your mother, and you. I hung up. 2 minutes later, my dad sent a photo. My mom in a hospital bed, wrapped in bandages with her arm in a cast. My heart skipped a beat, my irritation vanishing. My grandpa had apparently gone on a warpath. A month passed. I was getting impatient. I was about to go find Chloe to finish the paperwork when I came home from a late shift and found a figure in my living room. Chloe was sitting on the sofa. She wasn't wearing her usual floral dress. She was wearing a high-end, custom-made cosplay, a lake blue military uniform, silver white hair cascading over her shoulders, and colored contacts that made her eyes pierce through the dark. The accuracy was staggering. Even as a jaded otaku, I was stunned. She stood up, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan, you're home. Do I look okay? My heart wrenched. Years ago, I'd asked her if she'd ever dress up for me. She'd pinch me and call me a creepy loser for liking that stuff. Now, the woman who called me creepy had painstakingly recreated my dream. I looked away. Since you're here, let's talk about the divorce. The smile died on her face, leaving only a ghost white mask. She collapsed back onto the sofa. Ethan, why? Is what I did really that unforgivable? I stayed silent for a long time. When her sobbing subsided into jagged breaths, I finally spoke. To be honest, for most couples, what you did might be something they could move past. You didn't technically cheat. Not physically. Then why? She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. Are you bored of me? Is there someone else? Because I love you. That's why I have to leave. She stared at me, bewildered. I let out everything I'd been holding in. If this were just a business arrangement, I wouldn't care. But I actually fell for you. And because I love you, if we stay married, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering. If you're 10 minutes late, I'll wonder if you're with him. If your phone pings, I'll wonder who's texting. I'll become a paranoid, suspicious man that I hate. I don't want that life, and you don't either. I sighed. The moment you called him and hid it from me, you broke the trust. Once it's broken, you can't just glue it back together. Can you understand that? Because you love me, you're leaving. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Chloe wailed, pulling her knees to her chest. I didn't comfort her. Tomorrow morning at the courthouse, I'll give you a larger share of the assets as a settlement. If you don't show, I'm hiring a lawyer. I went upstairs without looking back. I could hear her muffled crying through the floorboards all night. The next morning, I found her still on the sofa, still in the cosplay. She looked broken. Ethan, she rasped, let me make you breakfast. One last time. 5 years, and you made it every single morning. I never once made it for you. Let me do this, then we go. I nodded. Okay. Chloe didn't know how to cook. Usually it was takeout or me cooking. I watched her in the kitchen, surprisingly nimble as she whipped up a bowl of pasta with a fresh tomato basil sauce. I've been practicing at my mom's, she said, her voice small. I thought, when you stop being mad, I make you breakfast every day to make up for the last 5 years. She tried to smile, but a tear hit the counter. I guess I won't get the chance. I ate the whole bowl in silence. It was warm, but my chest felt like it was filled with ice. We went to the courthouse. She asked for the house, a place my parents had paid for in cash. She offered to sign a promissory note to pay me back the difference over time. I told her not to worry about it. In the end, I took the $8 million in cash and savings, and she took the $15 million penthouse. As we walked out of the building, she called my name. Ethan, I regret it so much. I regret that when he said he'd been waiting for me, I felt a moment of pity. But there's no way to go back, is there? I pressed my lips together. Goodbye, Chloe. 3 months later, I bought a 2-bedroom condo near my office. Word of my divorce spread through the company. Several female co-workers started making moves. I knew why. A single manager with a clean slate and no kids is a catch. I was used to being alone, but after 5 years of a noisy, lively home, the silence was deafening. After a few weeks of loneliness, I accepted a date with a new intern. She looked like she stepped right out of a manga. Stunning figure, big eyes. I thought if things went well, I could settle down again. Occasionally, my mom would call and gossip about Chloe. She found out from college friends that Caleb Vance had actually been married for years. Chloe had been so livid about being played that she drove to Caleb's hometown and told his wife everything. The wife sued for divorce and took half of Caleb's assets. My mom swore she wasn't trying to help Chloe. She just didn't want me snitching to Grandpa again. 5 years passed. I dated 3 women. The intern turned out to have a long-term boyfriend. I'd come home early from a business trip to surprise her and saw a man kissing her passionately outside her apartment. Turns out they'd been together for 3 years. I'd been a side piece for a year without knowing it. The second was a corporate executive, 27, a total boss girl. Everyone said she was too picky to date. Then her husband found out about me and tried to jump me in the parking lot. I've been framed as a homewrecker because she told everyone she was single. By the third one, I was jaded. I figured beautiful women were all trouble. I tried dating a girl who was average. On our first date, she dragged me to a hotel, and I caught her trying to poke holes in our protection while I was in the shower. I put my clothes on and bolted. I stopped believing in love. But my parents were getting older, and they wanted a grandkid. I was 35. I felt the clock ticking. After a week of debating, I dialed the number I still knew by heart. Chloe was still single. She'd tried dating, but the guys she liked didn't like her, and the ones who liked her were gold diggers her parents didn't trust. We met at her old coffee shop. She wore a simple white dress, her hair pulled back. She looked mature, settled. I turned red, stuttering out my proposal. I know this sounds insane, but my parents are breathing down my neck. You're still single. What if we just had a kid? We could do IVF. I'll leave everything I own to the child. I wanted to crawl under the table. I had been so firm about the divorce, and here I was, crawling back for a legacy. I expected her to call me a freak. Instead, she sat in silence for a few seconds, then nodded. Okay, things moved quickly after that. We didn't end up needing IVF. 5 months later, she was pregnant. I moved back into the big house. She'd never sold it. It looked exactly the same as the day I left. After the baby was born, we stayed together. But neither of us ever brought up the idea of getting remarried. Story complete.